Pressure grows on the government to give more details about what Brexit will mean for the United Kingdom. Labour is calling for proper scrutiny of the government's plans to leave the EU.
The pound is plummeting, business is worrying, and the government has no answers. The Prime Minister says she won't give a running commentary.
I'm optimistic about the prospects of this country once we leave the European Union. I'm optimistic about the trade deals that other countries now actively are coming to us to say that they want to do with the United Kingdom.
MPs have just begun debating the matter in the Commons. We'll be asking how much pressure the Prime Minister is under to allow MPs a vote on Brexit plans, also this lunchtime. The last moments of a 15-year-old girl randomly killed in a frenzied stabbing by a local shopkeeper. He's jailed for at least 27 years. We'll have the latest on Syria. Students in South Africa continue to clash with police over government plans to stop free university education. Free flu vaccinations for the first time. 7-year-olds are being offered protection against the virus in England and Wales. And baffled fans. What prompted Will Young's sudden departure from Strictly?
In the South, guilty. A jury at Winchester convicts a 15-year-old schoolgirl who attacked her best friend with a knife. And the charity aiming to make sure a heart defibrillator is never more than 8 minutes away.
Good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1. There's growing pressure on the government to set out its Brexit strategy to MPs before formal negotiations begin with the EU. Labour is staging a Commons debate this afternoon, calling for proper scrutiny of discussions, asking ministers 170 questions on what Brexit might mean. The government has promised Parliament will have an important role in discussions. This lunchtime, the Prime Minister and the Labour leader clashed over Brexit during Prime Minister's questions. Jeremy Corbyn accused Theresa May of risking a shambolic Brexit, but she said she was confident over the UK's future outside the EU. Here's our political correspondent, Ben Wright.
Should MPs have the final say, Prime Minister?
No chance is Number 10's view. But as the Prime Minister headed to Parliament this morning, MPs were demanding a bigger say on the Brexit deal she needs to cut with Brussels before the separation talks begin.
We don't need all of the detail, and of course there have to be confidential negotiations, but not even to set out the broad terms for Parliament to discuss and approve is to undermine parliamentary sovereignty, which was a thing that was made great play of in the referendum campaign.
Nearly 4 months on from the referendum, Parliament is pushing its way into the debate about how and when Britain leaves the EU. Some Tory MPs are putting pressure on the government too.
What we're asking for is for Parliament, which is sovereign, and that's why many people voted as they did in the EU referendum, to have a say and to steer the government as to what the broad thrust of its position should be.
The British people have spoken, and the answer is we're out.
In June's referendum, Britain voted to quit the European Union, but leaving will be a long and complex process. Theresa May has said the government will ask for negotiations to start with the EU by the end of March 2017. There is then 2 years for both sides to agree a deal, which means the UK is expected to have left the EU by the summer of 2019. The government has promised Parliament an important role in its Brexit discussions, but is adamant there is no need to give MPs a vote on its negotiating aims or the timing of the start of talks with the EU. In fact, some Tory MPs think it would be crazy for the government to reveal its negotiating hand so soon.
I would urge Labour not to assume that the government needs to set out any weaknesses or problems it thinks there might be in the future negotiation, because surely we're a team and we want to win.
And at Prime Minister's question time, Theresa May insisted MPs would have a say over Brexit.
First of all, the Secretary of State for exiting the European Union has already made 2 statements in this House. I believe 4 hours of questions followed from those. A new select committee has been set up, which crucially includes representatives from all parts of the United Kingdom, which will be looking at these issues. And only just over a week ago, I announced that there will be a great repeal bill in the next session of Parliament to repeal the European Communities Act. So Parliament's going to have every opportunity to debate this issue.
But certainly for Labour, that is not enough. On the biggest political question for decades, this looks set to be a long winter of wrangling between Parliament and the government. Ben Wright, BBC News, Westminster.
Let's speak to our assistant political editor, Norman Smith. And how much pressure is there on the Prime Minister to allow MPs a vote on Brexit?
Well, Sophie, you sense for the first time, really, Theresa May has been forced onto the back foot over Brexit with growing demands from MPs that this place, Parliament, should have a say, a vote on her approach to the negotiations, with MPs saying it's not good enough just to allow Mrs May to go into the negotiating chamber, with Parliament not having any idea of her approach to key issues like the single market, freedom of movement and immigration and security. And what compounds Mrs May's difficulties is a lot of Tory MPs are among those who are unhappy, who say that parliamentary sovereignty was really at the heart of much of the Brexit referendum, and so Parliament should have a say over the Brexit deal. Mrs May's response in the Commons this lunchtime has been to say, look, there'll be loads of debate. The Brexit Secretary's already spent hours in the Commons answering questions. There'll be a debate this afternoon. But in effect, do not tie my hands by having a vote binding me to certain positions. I think that we are, if not getting a vote, we are getting a sense of Mrs May's approach, certainly when it comes to the critical issue of the single market, because again in the Commons at Prime Minister's questions, she seemed to indicate that continued membership of the single market is not necessarily going to be one of her priorities, saying she would seek to secure access to the European market, but she was not going to try and negotiate which bits of EU membership we should retain.
Norman Smith in Westminster, thank you. A shop owner from Clydebank has been jailed for 27 years for the murder of a 15-year-old girl. The High Court in Glasgow heard that John Leatham stabbed Paige Doherty more than 60 times when she stopped at his shop for a sandwich. The judge called her murder a savage, frenzied attack on a child. Ben Ando reports.
The last sighting of 15-year-old Paige Doherty alive as she walked into a deli shop in Clydebank in March this year. Paige, who was just 4 foot 8 inches tall, had stayed the night at a friend's house and was on her way to a Saturday job. 10 minutes later, the shutters of the store were pulled down. Its owner, Andrew Leatham, a married father of one, had stabbed her to death in what the judge said was a savage and frenzied attack. She suffered more than 140 knife wounds.
What you did was truly reprehensible. It is impossible to comprehend how an apparently happily married man with a young child who's running a successful business is capable of such an horrific level of violence.
CCTV showed Leatham purchasing cleaning materials before carrying Paige's body out to his car and putting it in the boot. 2 days later, he left her body on wasteland a mile away. Leatham admitted murder. In court today, her family shouted abuse as he was sent down. Paige's aunt leant over the glass partition and asked him simply, "Why did you do that?"
Today we see a monster put behind bars for the unthinkable brutal crime he committed against our daughter Paige. A beautiful 15-year-old with a full life ahead of her and a massive family and group of friends are left to carry on with her no longer here. There is no sentence high enough to justify what has happened, but we can now say there is one less evil man in this world, which then makes the world that bit more safe for our kids to grow up in. Paige is now safe and can finally rest in peace knowing justice has been served to a high standard. We would like to thank the public for the support over the last 7 months. Without this support we might very nearly have gave up, but reading comments and hearing some touching words gave us strength to carry on. All we can do as a family is take each day at a time. There is a huge piece missing in our family that can never be replaced.
In mitigation, John Leatham's own lawyer said that he was an unexceptional individual. He said there was nothing in psychiatric reports to indicate that he had some kind of personality disorder or was prone to explosive outbursts of anger. In short, he said, his actions on that day defied reasonable explanation. Leatham claimed he panicked after Paige threatened to report him for sexual assault when he did not give her a job. No one except John Leatham knows exactly why he murdered Paige Doherty in his deli. His sentence is life, and he must serve at least 27 years in jail before he can be considered for parole. Ben Ando, BBC News, Glasgow.
The diplomatic war of words over Syria has intensified. In Moscow, the Russian Defence Ministry has accused the UK of Russophobic hysteria after the Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson accused Russia of being involved in the bombing of an aid convoy in Syria. Mr Johnson also called for protests outside the Russian embassy in London. Richard Galpin reports.
Rescue teams in the northern city of Aleppo rushed to the site of yet another airstrike in a rebel-held area. The bombardment by Russian and Syrian warplanes intensifying in recent days, bringing more accusations that war crimes are being committed because civilians are being targeted. From the rubble here, a young boy is pulled to safety. A rare moment of joy. Repeated scenes like this are fueling the demands of British MPs for Russia and Syria to be referred to the International Criminal Court and for protests to be held at the Russian embassy in London, as the Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson called for yesterday. All this inevitably provoking a sharp response from Moscow today, with one official accusing members of the British establishment of Russophobic hysteria. And as for Boris Johnson's allegations in Parliament yesterday that Russian planes had bombed a UN aid convoy last month, that was described as a storm in a glass of muddy London water. Another issue raised in the Commons emergency debate on Syria yesterday was the possibility of imposing no-fly zones for Syrian military helicopters, including shooting down any which attack civilian areas. But this idea has been dismissed by many.
I cannot see how NATO forces can impose a no-fly zone when you have the most sophisticated Russian surface-to-air missiles on the ground. You'd have to take those out, and you have Russian airplanes operating in the air. You cannot do these things when you have another great power's military engaged in that theatre. You have to be realistic about this. You cannot pursue humanitarian goals in Syria and in the process risk confrontation between the United States and Russia.
Particularly as today it's been announced that Russian warplanes can now remain in Syria indefinitely, ensuring Moscow's dominance in the Syrian conflict. So despite the increasingly heated rhetoric, Britain and the West have only one real option: to push for more peace talks. Richard Galpin, BBC News.
Our diplomatic correspondent James Robbins is with me now. 250,000 people are trapped in eastern Aleppo. The conditions worsening all the time, yet there seems to be no hope for them in sight.
The outlook is, I think, entirely bleak. I mean, you heard Sir John Sawers there, former head of MI6, former British ambassador to the United Nations, making clear, very brutally perhaps, that actually there is no military option for the West to pursue. The idea of a no-fly zone, in his mind, is completely untenable because it would risk a superpower confrontation between the United States and Russia. Further than that, he thinks that actually the West has made itself impotent, that the decision by the House of Commons not to use military force against President Assad after his alleged use of chemical weapons, backed by the United States backing away from any sort of direct military involvement, has left the space open to the Russians. They are literally calling the shots. They are in no mood to retreat or to heed calls about war crimes. They say, in essence, this is what happens in war. It's brutal. And their motives are obviously entirely different from those of the West. They are there to support President Assad. They may be there to go after outlawed jihadists, but their other purpose is to ensure that Syria remains firmly within Russia's sphere of influence.
James Robbins, thank you. A court has heard how a man accused of murdering 4 young gay men called for an ambulance, saying he'd found the body of one of them slumped outside his flat in East London. But when the ambulance crew arrived, they immediately thought the death was suspicious. Stephen Port denies 4 murders and drugging and sexual offences against 8 men who are still alive. Well, let's speak to our correspondent, Daniel Sanford, who's at the Old Bailey. Daniel.
Yes, today's evidence confirms the discovery of the body of Anthony Walgate, a young fashion design student and the first of the 4 men that Stephen Port is accused of murdering. The jury were played a 999 call which Stephen Port made in the early hours of the morning in June 2014. He told the 999 operator there's a young boy, looks like he's collapsed outside, looks like he's collapsed, had a seizure or something, or just drunk. Asked if he knew if the young man was breathing, he said, "No, I don't know." And then he was asked, "Did you see anything happen at all?" And he said, "No." The jury heard that a police officer then found Stephen Port asleep in his flat just a few yards from where the body was found later that morning. And at first, Stephen Port said that he'd found the body outside when he'd returned from work as a cook at a local bus garage. That was the first version of events that Stephen Port gave to police. But the jury's also heard that Anthony Walgate's friends had spoken to him before he went out to Barking, and he'd said that he was going to meet someone. He'd actually showed them a picture of the person that he was going to meet in Barking, and Anthony Walgate's friends say that the picture that Anthony Walgate showed them before he went out was a picture of Stephen Port. Stephen Port denies 4 murders and also a series of sexual and drugs offences against 8 men who survived.
Daniel Sanford, thank you. Monarch Airlines has agreed a deal that will allow it to keep operating by securing new funding of £165 million. As a result of the investment, the Civil Aviation Authority has agreed to renew the Monarch's ATOL licence, which protects package holiday customers if the airline goes bust. Lloyds Banking Group has confirmed further details about job losses as part of a restructuring plan announced 2 years ago. More than 1,200 jobs will be cut from its finance group operations, retail and marketing divisions. The company, which is still 9% owned by the taxpayer, is expected to cut 9,000 jobs in total, about a tenth of its workforce. The singer Will Young has insisted that he is absolutely dandy after his sudden departure from Strictly Come Dancing. The 37-year-old has not said any more about why he's quit, but in a text message to the Radio 2 Breakfast Show, he described the reason as all very undramatic. Last night, he announced he was leaving Strictly after just a few weeks for personal reasons, prompting a flood of speculation on social media. Here's our entertainment correspondent, Colin Patterson.
Will Young sambaing his way to 4th place on the Strictly leaderboard on Saturday night. 3 days later, he'd quit, announcing in a statement last night that he was leaving for personal reasons. On today's Radio 2 Breakfast Show, Chris Evans revealed that he'd just received a message from him.
So, Will has texted us this morning and he says, look, here's the thing. I'm absolutely dandy, thanks. It's all very undramatic, really. I've done my statement and others can say what they want to say. I never read what they say anyhow.
Will Young's departure follows a frank discussion with head judge Len Goodman on the last show.
It's a salsa, and I would have liked just a soupçon more of the salsa. And I got about 6 or 8 bars in the middle.
There are 24 counts of 8 of salsa in the routine. You're the expert.
And my other little advice is turn up, keep up and shut up. But it's only a joke. It's only a joke, Will.
But it would seem an unlikely reason for him to become only the 5th person in the show's 14-year history to quit.
It's a shocker. Everyone was really surprised to hear this news. No one saw it coming because Will is one of the favourites in the competition. He's been doing so well. He's got that real sort of performance entertainment streak, and everyone thought he was going to get to the final and maybe lift the glitter ball. He has talked openly in the past about having anxiety and depression, so it's pure speculation, but perhaps there's something going on there.
Sexy.
You feeling sexy?
No, I'm feeling faint.
His partner, Karen Clifton, tweeted that she was sad he'd decided to quit the show and knew that it hadn't been an easy decision for him.
As for what's going to happen with the show, well, neither eliminated celebrity will return. Another will be voted off this weekend. And as things stand, the final will contain not the usual 4 couples, but 3.
I think I better leave right now.
Will Young's last #1 single was Leave Right Now, and now he has, saying he will return to being a viewer, although he is going to keep dancing. Colin Patterson, BBC News.
The time is coming up to 1:20, our top story this lunchtime. MPs have begun debating what Brexit will mean for the United Kingdom. Some are calling for a Commons vote before the UK triggers Article 50 on leaving the EU. And coming up, the famous Giant's Causeway. Now researchers say the myths of giants could be based in some scientific fact.
In South Today, trying to save the Isle of Wight's only ice rink. The protest planned at Ryde Arena after bailiffs closed the ice rink down. And welcome to the world of grass track speedway. We'll be introducing the European champion, a teenager from Puddletown.
In South Africa, there have been more violent clashes at a number of universities between police and students who've been protesting for weeks about government plans to stop free university education. The government, which is struggling with a massive budget deficit, has said it will continue paying for the poorest students but cannot afford free education for all. But some students are demanding that all universities be shut down until the government gives in. Our Southern African correspondent Alistair Leithhead reports.
This is one of the most prestigious universities in South Africa. The first children to be born after the end of apartheid are coming of age, and they're angry. They're scenes reminiscent of another time. Their parents fought the authorities for freedom, but this generation wants more. Free university education for all, disrupting end-of-year exams to get it.
But at the end of the day, we're not going to be apologetic about making sure that the majority of students at this university that can't afford to pay fees, that can't afford accommodation or have food, for them to continue protesting, we're not going to be apologetic about that.
If students can't graduate, there are no junior doctors, no trainee teachers. The country and the economy will suffer.
Well, this standoff by police against the students is more than just about wanting free education. It's all about a much bigger problem in South Africa, about inequality and about race.
There's still much white wealth in Johannesburg's smartest suburb, which towers above the poor township of Alexandra. It's here 18-year-old law student Siyasanga Matai lives with her Aunt Hazel, who brought her up when she was orphaned at 8.
At least if as students we saw that there's no money in South Africa, maybe we wouldn't be protesting like this, but because we know that there is money, but it is not used appropriately, so that's why.
She just wants to go back to class. Her aunt has struggled to pay her fees despite a bursary.
I didn't expect the students to be fighting for education, so I thought everything was gonna be easy for everyone, for the poor of the poorest.
In the municipal elections,
President Jacob Zuma and his ruling African National Congress have been smeared by scandals and allegations of corruption. Freedom wasn't supposed to be like this.
People are really just saying that we don't think that that's what's being done to redress the past or to try to really build a new South Africa is adequate. And the government, instead of responding to our legitimate grievances, is ignoring us.
There's little sign of the protests fading, with more demonstrations planned across the country. This is an important time in South Africa's coming of age. Alistair Leithhead, BBC News, Johannesburg.
President Obama has called on Republicans to withdraw their endorsement of Donald Trump as their candidate for the White House. He told a rally that it didn't make sense to denounce Mr. Trump's controversial remarks about women and then back him for president. Meanwhile, a senior official at the United Nations has called the Republican candidate a global danger. Here's Richard Lister.
This election's become an unpopularity contest. Polls suggest most Americans have no love for Hillary Clinton, but far more now disapprove of Donald Trump. Deserted by the Republican leadership over his degrading comments about women, he's trying to divert the national spotlight away from his own character and onto his opponents.
Hillary Clinton is the vessel, a corrupt global establishment that's raiding our country and surrendering the sovereignty of our nation.
Our next president faces daunting challenges in a...
The latest Trump campaign ad portrays her as literally unfit for the presidency.
Hillary Clinton doesn't have the fortitude, strength, or stamina to lead in our world. She failed as Secretary of State. Don't let her fail us again.
Hillary Clinton says when Donald Trump goes low, she'll aim high. But she too is engaged in a battle over personality as much as politics.
Let's remember what's at stake. I'm running against a guy who denies science, denies climate change, says it's a hoax created by the Chinese.
The world has never seen an American election as divisive as this. Donald Trump in particular has attracted unusually outspoken criticism from foreign politicians. Today, the United Nations Human Rights Chief added his voice.
If Donald Trump is elected on the basis of what he has said already, and unless that changes, I think it's without any doubt that he would be dangerous from an international point of view.
For Barack Obama too, this is a key moment. He's been campaigning against Donald Trump with a passion which echoes his own run for the presidency 8 years ago.
All the progress we've made these last 8 years is on the ballot. Civility is on the ballot. Respect for women is on the ballot. Tolerance is on the ballot. Justice is on the ballot. Equality is on the ballot. Democracy is on the ballot.
But these pro-Trump protesters are just as passionate. There's nothing new perhaps in the ripping of banners, but making rape allegations about your opponent's husband says a lot about the rancorous tone of this campaign, which still has almost a month to go. Richard Lister, BBC News.
Fresh talks to settle the long-running dispute at Southern Railway have broken down without agreement. Members of the RMT union are in the middle of a 3-day strike in protest at plans to change the role of guards. More strikes are planned over the next 2 months. Yesterday, around a third of Southern services were cancelled. The number of hospital admissions for allergic reactions and cases of anaphylactic shock in England have increased by more than a third in the past 5 years. Doctors say rising levels of cleanliness have lowered people's natural resistance to bacteria and dust, which cause common allergies. The biggest ever flu vaccination programme for children in England begins today, and also for the first time the free nasal spray will be expanded to include 7-year-olds in England and Wales. It's already been offered to other groups at particular risk, like the over 65s, and primary school children in Scotland and Northern Ireland are already being vaccinated. Here's our health correspondent, James Gallagher.
Last winter was an eternity away for 3-year-old Noah. He suffered a severe case of flu after he wasn't immunised against the infection, and that's convinced his mum to get Noah protected this year.
Just can't risk him getting that poorly again, and the rest of us getting that poorly. But I think it's best to try and do whatever we can to stop them getting the flu virus.
Children are flu super spreaders, infecting friends in the playground and relatives at home. So a quick squirt up the nose of weakened flu virus is now being offered to all 2 to 7-year-olds in England and Wales. It's part of an expansion of the flu vaccination programme. And this year's flu jab will be offered to at-risk groups, including the elderly, pregnant women and people with medical conditions such as asthma.
There are millions of cases of flu every year. We will have thousands of admissions to hospital, and there is a real risk of death in some of those people, particularly if you have an underlying medical condition.
Yet only half of eligible school children were vaccinated last winter. Public Health England warns large numbers of parents remain unaware of the nasal spray and of the dangers of flu in children. But this year, Claire's determined that Noah will be immunised. James Gallagher, BBC News.
England's one-day series against Bangladesh has been controversial from the start, with security issues, tension between the teams and reprimanded players. Now the decider is well underway in Chittagong. Bangladesh have set England a tough target of 278 for victory, as Joe Wilson reports.
In Bangladesh, the cricket got serious. The home side had practised without apology. Sure, there'd been aggression, even confrontation. Now here was a match which really mattered, just as it should be. England bowling first in this deciding game, Bangladesh trying to hit boundaries. Where's that gone?
Oh, watch the stumps.
With the series level at 1 match each, this was going to be close, surely.
No idea where it was.
In the last couple of years, Bangladesh have rarely lost at home, and they'd not come to watch a defeat. Bangladesh had reached 80 without losing a wicket, then this. Silence, except Stokes. It only takes a 4 to restore the noise.
Pulled away for a boundary, pulled away in style.
Tamim Iqbal is Bangladesh's all-time best. 5,000 runs for him in one-day internationals. But he was soon out here.
wickets.
106 for 2. Whenever Bangladesh threatened to break free, England pulled them back. So runs scored after sunset were crucial to Bangladesh. 2 wide to hit, said the umpire, more to the score. England unimpressed, Stokes especially. Stokes was even gloomier after he dropped Mushfiqur and then watched him do this. Bangladesh's total 277 will take some chasing in the Chittagong evening. Joe Wilson, BBC News.
And finally, Irish mythology is filled with stories of giants, but new research suggests there could be some truth in the legends after all. Scientists have found an area in Northern Ireland where people have what's called a giant gene, which makes some of them grow to around 7 feet tall. Our Ireland correspondent Chris Butler reports.
This stone circle isn't the only link to history here in Mid-Ulster. This area has a reputation for being a land of giants. And that's not just rooted in legend, it's in the blood.
That's me when I was 7, 8 years old.
Brendan Holland is just one of generations here who carry what's known as the giant gene. At his height, he stood almost 6 feet 11 inches tall, and it's likely he would have grown to well over 7 feet if it wasn't for the treatment he received for gigantism, a condition caused by that gene, which leads to abnormal growth.
Do you object being called a giant?
No, not at all. People can call me what they like, and many of the time they have.
However, gigantism is a condition that can be life-threatening.
My mother passed it to me, and she never knew that. And many people still, to this day, are passing the gene on without knowing it, and that will continue.
DNA evidence has shown that Brendan was related to Charles Byrne, who in the 1700s became famous as the Irish Giant. His 7.5-foot skeleton is still on display in a museum in London. The gene they share affects the pituitary gland and impacts on their health as well as their height.
20% of people who carry the gene will develop the disease, so we could develop blindness, severe headaches and die prematurely. But with effective therapy, I think that problem can be alleviated quite substantially. So the emphasis really is on early diagnosis.
And with the gene still present in the population here, they've been carrying out tests to try to identify people who carry it. So far, they've found 15 families.
We were surprised because a lot of the people we found really are no different than anybody else. They're normal height, stature and so on. But of course it's the complications that maybe 1 or 2 generations down the line in their children or grandchildren, that's what we're hoping to prevent with this.
There was probably at least some truth in the centuries of stories told about giants. But it's likely that at their heart was a gene that caused considerable pain and problems. That's why many want the idea of generations of giants to be consigned forever to history. Chris Buckler, BBC News, Mid-Ulster.
Time now for a reminder of our top story this lunchtime. MPs have begun debating what Brexit will mean for the United Kingdom. Some have called for a Commons vote before the UK triggers Article 50 on leaving the EU. That's all from us. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Bye-bye.